I'm Lou Brutus. For my money, my next guest is one of the great vocalists currently in music. His band, the Struts, are awesome, and I'm always very happy to speak to Luke Spiller. Luke, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very good. We'll backtrack just a little bit. I didn't get a chance to speak to you after the last gig I caught, but it was a pretty unique circumstance. You guys were playing where second base normally is at Camden Yards in Baltimore, Maryland, after the Orioles game. And it was an amazing gig. Tell me about the show. We hung out for a while beforehand, but looked like a pretty interesting day.
Yeah, the show itself was really fun. It was a bit of a throw and go situation, which always has its challenges. But I was really, uh, to be quite frank, I think both myself and the rest of the band were quite surprised of the turnout of people, especially considering that the show was to take place between 30 and 40 minutes after the game had finished. And unfortunately, the home team lost as well. So I didn't know how many people were going to stick around. And then it started to kind of rain a bit. And it was amazing to see all those people like rush to the stage and out of sort of like the seating areas. So yeah, it was a fantastic gig.
Yeah, there were thousands down on the field. I began in the photo pit and then went to watch. I wanted to sort of drink in the entire space. There were a ton of people in the stadium. Had you ever been to a baseball game before?
No, no, I'd never have been to a baseball game before. That was my first one, and I'm not going to forget it anytime soon either.
And you all came away with nice Orioles jerseys, so that's a plus.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was really fun. Apart from this, I remember this one guy. We were in like a private box as you came in and spoke to us and hung out with us. Some random guy managed to sneak his way in to the our area and ate the food, took a shit in the toilet, and then like eventually we were like, who is this guy? And I think the dead giveaways, he turned to one of the band members and said, oh, I'm with the Struts. And we were like, mm, we are the Struts, who are you? And then security came down and kicked him out, and he was then heckling us from like a couple of rows in front. And yeah, he was quite an interesting bloke. But other than that, a great show.
How I'm not that you can answer the question. Wouldn't he have figured out that the guys with the English accents were not the ones to say, I'm with the Struts too?
I know. It was very bizarre. But yeah, I mean, he clearly was, kudos to him. He had balls of steel. He came in and did what he wanted, but he did get kicked out. So shout out to the security at the grounds itself. They handled it really well.
Well, very good. And there's something where, eventually you'll put a book out of your adventures, and that'll make for a good one. Another interesting performance of late was you performing for the Taylor Hawkins tribute. And I would be keen to hear about not just how you felt about any performance, but about preparation and all the work that goes into something like that.
Oh gosh, I mean, where do I begin? Hats off to Dave and the rest of the Foos, and of course their entire team. I mean, I could see it just from the surface, the amount of organization and the logistical challenges of like putting on a show like that, which is the best part of 6 hours. But yeah, it was incredible. Like from the moment we all flew from LA to London, and then we stayed at this hotel for like an entire week, and there was like a lot of rehearsals at like this big recording studio that they booked out, and then a couple of like sound check rehearsals at Wembley itself. But gosh, it was just incredible. I mean, I made so many great friends. It was like, the only way I can describe it was like a rock and roll royalty like cruise ship experience. You know, it was like we were all on holiday with each other, and I was hanging out with some of my heroes like Justin Hawkins from The Darkness, who I'd met previously, but it was great to sort of get a lot of one-on-one time with him. And of course Josh Holmes from Queens of the Stone Age. Like we got on like a house on fire, and just all of the guests were such amazing people. It was just so good to be a part of. And then of course the day itself was just, I, I can't really describe it too much, but just imagining the sensation that you feel when there's 80,000 people like in a stadium have all come together for like one specific purpose, to like honor the memory and the talent of a great man, was really like heart-wrenching. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house when the show initially began and the countdown had finished, and it's still daylight at this point, so you can see everyone, you can see all these faces, and it was incredible. And then Dave comes out and with the rest of the band, and he makes this really amazing speech, and it just kind of hits you right there and then, you know, like, wow, we're all here together to like do this. But I remember even even rehearsing, I got called in for a specific time and date a couple of days before the actual show, where I was going to be running through We Will Rock You with, of course, Brian and Roger and the rest of the Foo Fighters. And Justin was also doing Under Pressure, so we were in the same sort of like rehearsal session. And I didn't think I was going to be nervous or anything like that, and I rarely get nervous for performances and whatnot. But I have to say, when I entered that studio, which I was already 5 minutes late for, which I felt terrible about because the London traffic was just dire. I walk in and I'm given my microphone, and my right hand's like kind of trembling like a little bit. I was like, fucking get it together, Luke, man. Like, what are you doing? And yeah, but it was, I'd never been in a room with so much talent in my life. I think it kind of just hit me there and then. And we ran through We Will Rock You and Somebody to Love, and I sang the fucking shit out of it. Like, you know, like there was no tomorrow, because the
Yes, you did.
adrenaline coursing through my veins was just raging inside, you know. But yeah, and then obviously the show day itself, I was like, no, I'm gonna be fine. And I had my mum and dad there. I had my my brother and sister, my best friend and his wife with me. And you know, as the day sort of progressed and the Queen section was really right at the end, before the Foos got up and did like 13 songs or something. So it was a long wait, you know, and I did find myself sort of pacing around a little bit in my dressing room. And I think it was about 2 hours before the gig. The sun had gone down. It was like nighttime. You can hear the roar of like the stadium from the dressing room. And I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna happen. And at that point, I was like, I'm gonna need a tequila or three. So I jumped up on the stage, and I was rather lubricated up by the time I got onto that stage. But what an experience, you know. And it was just something that I'm never ever gonna forget, you know.
One of the things that I'm sure that you noticed and have noticed before is Brian May is, I don't want to say freakishly tall, but he is an imposingly he's a physically imposing figure. So that's got to add a little bit to the sort of agita of the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has a presence. You know, both him and Roger do it. I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, of course, you speak to them, and I you know, I speak to Brian quite a bit from time to time, and he's such a gracious guy, and you know, he really, he comes across like nothing really quite phases him, and he's so well spoken and polite. But I'll never forget, he called me down. I had the call about half an hour before we went on stage, and it was Brian and Roger that want you to come to their dressing room. So I was like, okay, cool. So I went down, and you know, we shake hands, and Brian's like, how you feeling? And I'm like, I'm electric, like, let's go. And he was like, yeah, I called you down because I wanted us to do the walk to stage. And I'm like, okay.
Sorry,
So,
sorry. I can just imagine melting at this point.
yeah, so we're walking backstage at Wembley Stadium, and myself and Brian are leading the pack, you know, along with some of the other band members, and of course, like, Roger's behind us, Justin's there, and it felt so surreal, especially as a fan, like, seeing all of the footage that there's about of, like, you know, Freddie and Queen, like, doing those walks, like, in Madison Square Garden, and you know, and it becomes such an iconic like thing for to see, like, as a fan. So to kind of like be included in that in such a, it, you know, in a small way, in a lot of ways, was just, yeah, it took me, honestly, it took me an entire week to kind of come down from that performance and that day, and all the emotions that came along with it, you know.
If you will allow me one more question in this regard, what is it about, I guess, London in general, but also Wembley specifically? I attended large scale benefit concerts at both the old Wembley Stadium and the new Wembley Stadium. And I've been lucky enough to attend some very big historic concerts all over the globe. But there's something very, very special about that space. And is it anything that you can explain to me why it is?
I think it's just such a showcase of celebration and togetherness. And I think when you know, when you walk into some of these venues, the history that kind of comes with them, you can feel it. You know, I mean, not to kind of get too wooey about it, you know, or anything like that, but there's definitely something to be said of when huge amounts of people are kind of like getting together and experiencing such levels of joy. You can definitely feel that when you walk into some of these places, and Wembley is no exception, you know. And I guess, gosh, the old Wembley would have been even more heightened, you know, with, you know, Live Aid, for instance, that happened there. And then, of course, like, I know that Queen's last tour, the Magic Tour, the last London shows they did were at the old Wembley Stadium. And that, I'm not even going to go into the sporting events that have happened there. You know, a lot of joy and a lot of pain has been experienced in those stadiums. So I think there's something to do about where it is in the city as well. It's kind of very central, and it's like in the middle of Britain's capital, which has like a unique buzz about it as well. And it's just one of those names. It's Wembley, you know. It's there's very few places in the world that hold such expectation with just the name alone, you know.
Fascinating to speak to you about that, and I appreciate you sharing it all. Now then, let us talk about new Struts music, but I think this is something else that we have to sort of rewind a little bit and look at the last couple of years, because you guys had an album cycle essentially inside the pandemic shutdowns with Strange Days. So if we could talk about when the shutdown started a couple of years ago, where were you guys at? What were you doing? And then walk me through the next couple of years as an entity and getting new music done, including Strange Days.
Yeah, sure. So before the pandemic, we were on somewhat of a big role at that time. We were playing some really amazing shows, including like Pier 17 in New York and teaming up with Harley and whatnot. And then we officially moved as a foursome to LA in 2019. So that suddenly meant that we were way more accessible to people that we'd worked with in the past, and working with new people and creating music. And we started writing what we thought was going to be like the third record, and we were sort of in and out the studio all the time, and simultaneously preparing for a lot of touring during 2020, which we were hoping to have at least like a single or an EP to kind of go with that. And then of course, you know, the pandemic happened and everything just kind of flew out the window. So we, funny enough, we kind of just put all the material that we had to kind of one side, and we started to focus a lot more on our social media presence, keeping in touch with our fans, doing things like the Sunday service that we did. I was doing like quarantine radio, and because we had no idea how long this was going to go on for, like everyone else. And we kept doing that. And then suddenly there was an idea of getting together with a producer called John Levine, who we love and have worked with previously, like on songs like Body Talks and a lot of like Young and Dangerous, the second record. And yeah, initially we were like, okay, well, let's get to his, and for like 10 days, and let's sort of write and record like 2 or 3 songs, and we'll try and capture a bit of like this world that we're all experiencing, you know. And leading up to it, we had about 3 weeks of prep where, you know, we had to obviously completely isolate and take numerous tests, because we were going to create our own internal bubble between the band and the producer, and stay at his house and work like through the day. But leading up to it, we'd all sort of like, we're just coming up with ideas like by ourselves, and I had written like a whole collection of like kind of ideas and a lot of lyrical content. So what happened was, we arrived and the room sounded great, like everything was really coming together. John was playing piano, so he became like almost like a 5th member. And I think it was by day 3, we had like written and recorded takes of about 4 or 5 songs, which we all thought were really great. So we kept riding it, and we were like, what? We were just almost waking up every day saying like, how far can we push this? Like, how about we do something like this and this? And then eventually, after 6 or 7 days, we'd recorded and written like 9 original songs, and we did a cover. And yeah, within 10 days, like we'd pretty much written and recorded an entire record. So we were toying at the very beginning of maybe adding some things that we had done previously in 2019 into the mix, but we all collectively sort of said, well, you know, this was sort of like such a lightning in a bottle kind of moment, that we feel that it would only it would be disingenuous to sort of like add things from like the previous year with like a different sound into it. You know, we wanted to keep something really cohesive and have a lot of fun with it. And of course, while we were still recording, I was just like, yeah, why don't we get this person in, and why don't we have this person come in on the song? And because no one's doing anything, you know, and this could be sort of like a really unique record where we have all of these people that we've met along the way to sort of like come in and be a part of it. And it became like this really amazing but yet kind of bizarre record at the same time. And I think we really kind of captured that moment in time, which was what we really set out to do. And then of course we couldn't put it out. Well, we put it out, but we couldn't tour it, we couldn't really promote it. But we had some really kind of cool success in the United Kingdom for the very first time, which was great. Having like Robbie Williams on the song, we were on radio over there, which was a real breakthrough moment for us. And then eventually, obviously, we got back out on the road and things started to get, quote, kind of back to normal. And then, yeah, we ended up parting ways with our record company at the time, Interscope Records. And, you know, it wasn't anything bad or anything. It was just, you know, we just felt like, okay, we've done 3 records, and I think we all collectively decided that, you know, it was time to kind of move on and try something else, and really landed on our feet once we started talking to Scott Borchetta from Big Machine, and it's been incredible ever since. So we've just been working on this new record, and we're continuing to do so now. And like I said previously, we've got a couple of like shows coming up for radio, etc., during the rest of the year. But the next 3 months, we're really trying to get this record done and hopefully out for the first quarter of next year. So fingers crossed.
2 things, one of which, in talking about Strange Days, you mentioned the cover song. If you would go into a bit of detail on that, as it is one of my favorite songs from one of my favorite bands. I'd be curious how that tune came together and why you chose it.
Well, we obviously were in talks with Joe Elliott and Phil from Def Leppard. And I had heard the version of Do You Love Me by the band Baby. And no, Girl, sorry. The band was called Girl.
Yeah.
And they done this incredible version of the song, which was super glam. And I loved the sound, and I loved the arrangement that they did. So my thought was like, okay, well, I know that Phil actually used to play in Girl, and maybe this could kind of be a cool way of bringing them into the mix and doing this song. And but behold, you know, once I'd kind of approached Joe with the idea, he was like, you know, we'd rather do something original and new. And I was like, well, okay then. So we decided to do Hate How Much I Want You with them, which came out so much better. But then it meant that we had this just kind of random Kiss cover like on the record, but it came out pretty good. And I still enjoy listening to that one now as well.
Yeah, it's one of the great tunes on Destroyer, which is probably still my favorite Kiss record. Now, the one new tune you have out so far is Fallen With Me, which is just yet another tune from the Struts that is so catchy. You know, even when I don't want to have it stuck in my head, it is often still there. So just tell me about creating that song. It's got such a big, fat sing-along chorus to it.
Yeah, you know, that song was written and recorded, funny enough, before the pandemic. It was one of the songs that we sort of like put to one side once we started recording Strange Days, but it was still like in its demo form. And after listening to it for the first time in quite some time, I even myself, I was still like, you know, is it quite right? But then credit to Adam Slack, who then took the song and started to just really add a lot more guitars to it and give it a bit more of that like filthy sound. Then I was suddenly like, okay, yeah, great. This is now sounding fresh. It's sounding within our wheelhouse of what we're about. And yeah, everyone was super excited about it. And then we put it out and we've just been getting great reactions. And then even leading up to the release of about 3 weeks, we were in Europe doing a lot of touring, and we just added it into the set. We were just like, fuck it, you know, let's just start playing it. Like, there's no better time than the present. So
Yeah.
I've never seen a reaction to a new song that hadn't been released, let alone, you know, well, it hadn't been released at that time either, but people just got it like straight away. They're all singing the chant, they're all singing the chorus, they're jumping up and down. And I was like, yeah, I've been genuinely kind of shocked in the best way to sort of see how well it's been going down live. And now it's doing great at radio all across the United States, and it's still climbing up the chart. So, and it's still very early days in terms of like the cycle itself, from which it was at the date it was released. So I think it's a bit of a dark horse. We'll have to see like how far it actually goes, you know.
Luke, the mark of a catchy song, a great song, and this was the case with me personally. When you start singing along with the song, the first time you hear it, that's usually a really good sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's kind of like the perfect radio track. It's under 3 minutes long, which was done completely by accident. You know, it grabs you straight away, and it's just it's what they call a bop. You know.
You also had some, well, I wouldn't call it David Bowie interaction, but David Bowie related work of late, and I would love to hear how that all came together. It's all part of the Bowie film Moon Age Daydream, which I think is one of the greatest music related films I have ever seen. It's an amazing piece of work. Tell me about how you guys came to do the tune.
Well, Mike Garson, who was Bowie's piano player from the Stardust era all the way up until he passed away. He's been doing these fantastic like evenings where he's had some incredible like vocalists come down, you know, and I saw it and I was just like, how do I become a part of this? Because I think it's so cool and it's something that I've really wanted to do. And the setup's basically Mike on his piano and then just the vocalist. So he's such a virtuoso that it becomes like this really intimate experience. And the club, the Sunrose, which the shows take place in, is just like a small kind of like jazz kind of bar setup where there's probably about maybe 50 or 60 people, like table seating. And yeah, I went down the other day. I was invited by Mike and the actor Mason Alexander Park was there as well, who is just phenomenal. You know, an amazing talent. He's currently in Sandman on Netflix. He plays Desire, which he does a fantastic job. And I went down and he asked me if I would like to do Under Pressure, and I had no idea he was such a big fan of the band, which was really nice. And it was just an incredible experience. So I'm going to be doing my own shows with Mike, like an evening with this November.
Very good. Well, listen, Luke, it's always great to talk to you. You know, I think the world of the band, I think the Struts are one of the best rock and roll bands on the planet. And I can't wait to hear the rest of the new record. Hopefully something else by the end of the year, but certainly in early 2023. And I hope to see you very, very soon. Maybe I can make it out to LA and see you singing Bowie.
Yeah, man, come along. It'd be great.